Welcome back. Canfax is a division of the Canadian Cattlemen's Association and provides daily and weekly market data and analysis for cattle producers. We talked with Brian Perillat of Canfax about Neil's goals and what's in store for him in the next few years.
Yeah, so for starting off right now in the beef business, the volatility side of things, there's some fundamentals that are very optimistic for the sector. We look at the cattle industry, it's a long-term investment. When you're getting into the cow-calf side of things, you may not see a return on retaining a heifer for a couple years down the road. But overall, we've seen the herd shrink dramatically in North America and globally. Really, beef tonnage, beef supplies are decreasing while we're seeing wealth and population grow. So as a starting point, things look fairly optimistic for cow-calf producers. I think cow-calf producers really are kind of in the driver's seat of the industry. We've got excess feedlots competing for calves. We've got excess packing capacity. Again, with a cow-calf producer can work with these other players to help them, get some premiums and give you some negotiating power when you're talking to the feedlots and packing plants. Overall, we're going to have more hurdles as we go. We know there's volatile, but you can't always predict them. We don't know if it's a disease or a border closure or some sort of a policy arrangement. We've got, with the U.S. country of origin labeling, things that come into play, but you've got to sort of start small. I think it's good, he's got some, off-farm income. You don't want to bet. You've worked hard to build your equity. You want to protect it. You don't want to bet everything on, going to 300 cows overnight. Grow it slowly, get the relationships, get the experience going, and that'll all play into reducing some of the market, the volatility you'll face in your operation.
So what are the next 4 to 5 years look like for you?
Well, like we said, the beef industry, it's a pretty slow it's a slow ship to turn. We've seen declining numbers in the U.S. for about 15 years. Again, the U.S. is really the driver of the North American market. They have about 8 times as many cattle produce, about at least 8 times as much beef as Canada. So whatever's happening down there affects us. And the U.S. has been through tremendous drought. As I said, the smallest herd in 50 and 60 years. So cattle numbers are tight. By the time they retain heifers and grow these heifers and breed them and finish these cattle, we're not expecting to see any growth in the North American industry for 3 to 4 years. And so somebody who's in and can get ahead of that, those numbers is definitely in a strong position. And on top of that, we're seeing very limited, not very aggressive growth. Even Western Canada is sort of stabilizing, but we're not seeing numbers increase in a dramatic fashion as the old cycle used to see. So even though 3 to 4 years we may not be liquidating anymore, we may start to grow, it'll be a very modest growth with potentially much higher demand in 4 years. So, again, supply side very optimistic for new beef producers. Well, it can put us in a precarious position for sure. We just went through it last fall. As I said, you never know where the next shock's going to come from. Last fall, the E. coli issues and recalls, and finally the closure of the XL plant definitely put a lot of stress on the industry, a lot of stress on our markets, and we had to adjust rapidly. Unfortunately, only having 2 players, at times it's not as competitive in the marketplace as we'd like to see if you've got 5 guys or players bidding on cattle. So it's a bit of a disadvantage in just overall market competitiveness. But on the other hand, 2 large world-class facilities that can export anywhere in the world, have all the connections, can get as many efficiencies as they can out of production system is also an advantage to the Canadian sector. So again, as a producer playing in that game, you've just got to understand the stress is there. Generally, we can hopefully get, we've got players in the U.S. that aren't that far away that can buy cattle and be there as long as the border's open. So, understanding the whole side of things. We have some smaller plants in the industry as well, guys doing niche markets. But again, there's always risk and returns with all of these things. In niche markets really get into things where you've got to change your production. You take on a lot of maybe a higher cost system, and if the market doesn't come through or something happens with one of your smaller players in the industry, there's a risk there. So always risks. You can't mitigate them all, that's for sure. Yeah, well, like I said, welcome to the business, and the business is really the key part or key term in this. You got to take a business approach. You've got some equity there. You want to protect it. You want to make sure you're getting paid for your investments and paid for the risk you're taking, paid for your time in the business. So again, having a plan, operating strategically, getting a network around you is huge in this industry. It's kind of a small world, so it's fairly close-knit, understanding again what feedlots and what the whole supply chain is looking for beef. How can you grow cattle that are going to earn you top return, which really comes from providing value to people up the supply chain. What are they looking for? How do you produce it? And being economical at it. And we've got some lofty goals. That's exciting to get the young producers into the industry. And I think you got to take your time. As you grow your herd and you gain experience, opportunities may come up and may come and may go, and you've got to find what you want to do as well. Raising cattle and being involved in a supply chain you're comfortable with. It's important.
What information resources would you suggest that he finds?
Yeah, well, again, as you build your networks and build your supply chain, it's information is key in this world. There's so much information, but you do want to narrow it down to important information to your operation. Again, working with these other players.
Specific on some sites.
Again, on the market volatility side is understanding the entire market dynamics. It's hard for a cow-calf producer, but in the U.S. they have a futures market. The bulk of our pricing information we can go find out today, off the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, given futures expected prices for fat cattle, cost of production, looking at grain prices from, the Alberta Ag websites and things. And U.S., there's different analysts down in the U.S. who can provide a lot of background information on the U.S. market, how that affects us here. We at Canfax put out a lot of, weekly information, have a lot of historical information. The markets are very seasonal. We always talk about very unpredictable markets, but really there's a lot of seasonality to the markets. We know the fall time is generally a weaker time to sell calves. Springtime is generally a stronger time. Just some basic principles that, again, we can provide that, or other industry people can support that. Again, understanding, as you produce cattle for these different markets, there's different costs associated with that, and you've got to take your whole operation and your whole plan in mind as you take calves to market. Marketing, it's not a one-time selling. It's just sort of selling your cattle is a one-time, drop them off at the auction mart and say goodbye, whereas marketing cattle is really a longer-term strategic process to market your cattle to the right place at the right time for the right money, I guess.
Great. Well, that's the show. If you'd like to contact any of the experts profiled today, please visit our Facebook page at TCCA on CATV. Until next time, we'll see you between the windrows and the wire on This Country Called Agriculture.